Today, Counselling for Change. So today, I'm joined by Jocelyn Johnson, who is a counsellor. Hi, Jocelyn.
Hello, Martin.
Great to have you in the studio. And I wanted to chat with you about counselling, what it actually means, how you go about it, and why it's important. So let's start at the top. What does the counsellor do?
The counsellor builds a relationship with the clients that they're working with, and they journey together in trying to work through the issues or the concerns that are happening for the client that they bring to the table.
Right, so this is basically about personal relationships. It's about, all of the things that make life work or not work.
So usually someone is drawn to counselling because they want things to improve in aspects of their lives. They want to understand why things are happening as they are happening, and to improve upon that. Or it may also be an aspect of coaching, where somebody is wanting to change the way that they do things or wanting to move to a different pathway. And it's opportunities there to explore that together in a really safe place.
And I guess one of the interesting questions is why people can't feel they can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. They might know they've got issues. What's the advantage of having that objective external interaction?
That's a good question. And I think what happens in the counselling room, first of all, is that people get the opportunity to feel safe, to know that what they share is not going to go outside the room, that they've got stuff that's twirling, been around sometimes for many years inside of them, and they can do that bit by bit as they choose in the space and the pace that they want to do. Because sometimes it's quite painful. Most of us, all of us actually, hide things away. We stuff things away because that's an easier way to manage our world, and we're often trained to do that. But those things often get in the way of how we operate in our world. So it's an opportunity and a safe place to be able to process that little bit by little bit and to come to understandings about why we do things the way that we do them.
Well, I guess sometimes there's an issue of symptoms versus causes, right?
Yes.
So people might have, something which is worrying them, or have got a relationship that's not working. But I suspect that you probably sometimes find that that's really just a symptom of something much broader and much deeper that needs to be thought about.
Absolutely. So I'm firmly of the belief one of the ways that I operate is understanding attachment, which is the bonds that we form very early in our lives. And those bonds actually form tapes in our head. They're very strong, the way that we've learned. They're the map, if you want to understand it, of how we actually operate. And sometimes they're not always very healthy ways of thinking and being. And sometimes we need to really explore what they are and understand them and then make choices to change them. Certainly for those that have been through neglectful, abusive type relationships. But for all of us, there are things that we bring up with us that are not always that healthy that we can change. And that's the really exciting thing about counselling, is watching people grow and change the way that they do things to be healthier and to have better well-being. There is nothing more satisfying that I've found in my life, and the honour of that journey with people.
And typically you said it's a journey. How long does the journey take? What sort of interactions are involved and how frequently do those interactions occur?
Look, I think that's really different for everybody. For some people, they come and it's just a short-term thing that they want to discuss, and so it may only be 3-6 sessions, quite short. For others, if they've had a whole lifetime of things to unpack, then that obviously takes longer. And people make that choice. So for me as a counsellor, I say to people, look, how long do you want this to be? How often do you want this to be? This would be my suggestion, but that's a journey. Some people will come for a period of time, do some work, go away, work it out themselves and come back for a while and go, look, I've reached a crisis point, let's work through that again and go away. So it's different for everybody.
Right, so the journey is different and therefore the interactions are different and therefore the conversations you have are different. And I suppose that's the point. This isn't a formulaic thing. You can't fill in a spreadsheet and suddenly it'll all magically work.
No, it's like going to the doctor. So you can sometimes go with something that's really quite small and minor and you can still work through and get an improvement in whatever that issue was. Or you may be going to the doctor with a chronic condition, something that's been going on for a long period of time, and it takes time to work that through and find the answers. It's very similar to that. I am also trained as a registered nurse. I'm trained in mental health assessment, And often there's a correlation between the two because we're holistically made. The mental, the physical, the spiritual, our family relationships, they all relate to each other.
And I think that's really interesting that there is a single person with lots of instances of issues. I think some of the medical professionals sometimes will pick a bit rather than try and take a holistic view.
That takes time to be able to do that, which is, I guess, the advantage of being a counsellor versus being that nurse or the doctor, is that there's time to really hear a story. And I think that's really the case for me in mental health particularly, where sometimes people will go in and the symptoms are treated, but people will have come to me and I say to them, have you ever told your story to anyone? And they go, no, I've never actually shared the whole story. So that gives a lot of understanding for people to understand why is it that this is happening for them and how do each of those areas of their lives relate to each other. And that holistic approach is something that's very important for me within the counselling room.
Well, let me just pick up on your experience because you have an extensive background. You've been doing this for a long, long time. And I guess you've got the integrated approach coming from those experiences.
I have. So I think there's some advantages. So I went into the nursing field and I've worked with all ages across the lifespan, but partway through my nursing experience, I was working with children and families' health, and a lot of things were coming up. There was a lot of violence, domestic abuse, neglect, and I wanted answers, and that's what drew me into doing my counselling training and then took me on to do my master's. And I guess the attachment paradigm of understanding lives for us as the children and the things that we believe made sense to me, and it helped me give a framework, I think, to understand in my own life and to work with other people.
Okay. And in terms of the actual interaction process, can this be done online or do you have to do it face to face?
Look, I think it can be done. I have worked with both. I think for me it would be, I think face to face, probably people feel safer and there's a personal relationship. But I have increasingly over recent years with COVID and other things that are happening, have worked more online with people at all levels, sometimes in the short term, sometimes the long term, sometimes in a supervisory capacity. And it seems to work well for clients that I've worked with.
And just thinking about the range of issues that might present without going into individual cases, presumably sometimes there's a sort of a financial aspect or a well-being aspect or even a physical violence aspect or kids misbehaving. I mean, there's so many different variants.
There are. And basically that's up to the client. I say, you bring, it's your work, so you bring to the room the things that you want to work on this week. So what's on top for you and what do we want to work on? And it goes along really. And people often will work on some things that are not the most deep things initially because they want to build trust. Particularly in terms of domestic violence and in terms of abuse of work. So I have done some specialty in the sexual area, and so that's taken me into the area of working with sexual abuse and working with trauma. And that work takes longer and you need to have a good trust relationship to work in those areas. But equally, I've worked in youth, I've worked in family court, which is working with families to work out what they're going to do with their children. Done a lot of parenting work over the years and I've worked with children with issues with their parents in the room. And yeah, I've had that privilege, and now I also do a lot of work with elderly. So had the privilege of working right across the lifespan, I guess, in the years that I've been out there working both as a nurse and a counsellor.
So when counselling goes well, what's the sort of outcome that you can achieve?
The outcome is amazing, actually. I've watched people come from domestic violence and gradually come to an understanding and gradually be able to change the way that they think about themselves, understanding the situation that's occurring for them, and to gradually make boundary changes and choices about, as you understand the past and you understand where you are now, then that leaves you free to make choices about your future. And that's in everything. That's in life coaching, around career choices, that's in choices around your relationships, it's in choices around your work situation, all of those things. It's you as a client coming to and understanding yourself with support through a therapeutic process, really, which is very powerful and does work. It really works.
Okay, and just to re-emphasise, it's completely confidential. It can be done very, very discreetly.
One of the boundaries of being a counsellor is that it is confidential. There are two exceptions to that, which we would always state at the beginning of a relationship. So if a client shares something that will harm themselves, or if they share something that will harm somebody else, then I would have a discussion with that person. And that's occasionally happens. So when somebody's suicidal or there's a child abuse issue, then you need to have a discussion about that, about what that might mean in terms of the boundaries. But that's rare. Otherwise, it stays in the room. Yeah.
And just in terms of your own personal circumstances, here you are in Australia at the moment for various reasons to do with COVID. So in terms of clientele, are there geographic limitations?
There are not. That's the one good thing about using a Zoom or using the IT, is that there aren't limitations. So I do have some time here. I've come over to Australia to look after my twin sister who died previously before Christmas. I can't go back to New Zealand at this time, so I'm thinking this would be a good time to be able to pick up some more clients if they're out there. I've never had to advertise up till now, actually. I've always had sufficient clients come through from word of mouth, always with my practice, but now is a time where I thought if there are people out there that would like that time and that relationship to work through something that's happening in their world, then I would welcome that now.
And how would they reach you?
I think the best and easiest way is to reach them through my Gmail. So it's Jocelyn, that will come up on the screen, Jocelyn Johnstone, STONE, @gmail.com. And then we can have a conversation about the costs of that and how that might work for you and any questions that people might like to have. And we can set up a time that suits clients and works for them.
Well, I really appreciate it, Jocelyn, and I think there's a really important service here. I think there are a lot of people, particularly in the current environment with COVID and everything else, which would benefit from having some deep conversations and meaningful conversations, and perhaps going from symptoms to causes, because if you get to those causes, there's a much greater chance of actually making real change that sticks.
Absolutely. It's such a privilege and very satisfying for both parties when people make that journey and make significant changes in their world. And we all need to do that in our lives and take opportunities to process that deeper stuff. It's scary, and I say to people, you're 50% of the way there by the time you make an appointment, because what you've done is gone, there's something I want to change, and being courageous enough to actually step forward and go, let's make some changes and let's do this for something better in our lives.
Great. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Martin.